Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking 26 dense pages of legal statutes, articles, and clauses, and, well, transforming them into a clear visual roadmap. We're unpacking the 2019 Vietnamese Labor Code to create your ultimate employee lifecycle guide. Whether you're about to sign your very first contract or you're a seasoned pro, this information is absolutely essential. But before we get into the legislative weeds, let me ask you a really simple question. Do you truly understand your rights at work? I mean, so often we get that exciting job offer, we skim that massive stack of paperwork, and we just sign on the dotted line, right? But knowing exactly what you are legally entitled to is, hands down, your strongest professional asset. Here is our roadmap. We'll follow the life cycle of an employee from day one to departure, covering basic workplace rights, entering the contract, probation period regulations, terminating the contract, and finally, allowances upon leaving. Section 1. Basic Workplace Rights. Let's start with a foundational definition pulled directly from Article 3. What exactly makes you an employee in the eyes of the law? Legally, it boils down to 3 specific criteria. You're an employee if you work under an agreement, you're paid a wage, and you're subject to an employer's management and supervision. If you check those 3 boxes, congratulations, this code applies directly to you and safeguards your time and labor. Now moving on to Article 8, this really establishes the protective tone of the state's policies right out of the gate. The code doesn't just, casually suggest what employers should do to be nice. It lays down the absolute law on what they cannot do under any circumstances. And these are incredibly strict boundaries. Article 8 explicitly prohibits acts like workplace discrimination based on race, gender, or social status. It completely outlaws forced labor, sexual harassment, and even the exploitation of vocational training. Essentially, employers can't use training as a sneaky excuse to extract free labor from you. It sets a firm, zero-tolerance baseline for workplace culture. Section 2. Entering the contract. When you sit down to sign that paperwork, you'll generally encounter one of 2 contract types outlined in Article 20. On one side, we have indefinite term contracts, which is basically open-ended employment. On the other side, we have definite term contracts. The really crucial point here is that a definite term contract has a strict legal maximum of 36 months, meaning an employer can't just keep stringing you along on temporary rolling contracts forever without eventually offering you a permanent position. So how exactly should that contract be recorded? Well, according to Article 14, a written contract is legally mandatory for almost all employment agreements. There's only one very narrow exception. Oral contracts are permitted, but only for temporary work terms that are under a single month. Basically, if you're going to be working somewhere for more than 30 days, you absolutely must get it in writing. Section 3. Probation Period Regulations. Looking at the actual text from Articles 24 through 27, we can clearly see that the state recognizes just how vulnerable the probation period can be. Because of that, they establish strict mathematical caps on exactly how long a probation can last, as well as the absolute minimum pay you must receive during this trial window. Let's map this out clearly. The length of your legal probation is directly tied to the complexity and skill level of your specific job. So, if you're hired as an enterprise manager, your probation can last up to 180 days. Jobs requiring professional or technical degrees? Those max out at 60 days. Positions requiring intermediate skills are capped at 30 days. And for other basic work, it's just 6 days. You can easily use this to check if your employer is illegally stretching out your probation. And here is a massive takeaway. 85%. According to Article 26, your probation salary must literally be at least 85% of the official job salary, period. Employers can't just pay you some arbitrarily low wage because you're learning the ropes. The law guarantees a high earning floor right from your very first day. Section 4. Terminating the contract. Now, Article 35 is a vital piece of the Labor Code. It legally guarantees your right as an employee to unilaterally terminate your contract. You're not trapped. You don't need your employer's permission to leave, just as long as you fulfill your obligation to give the proper notice. And this perfectly illustrates what I like to call the quitting countdown. Based on that exact article, your notice period depends entirely on your specific contract type. Indefinite term contracts require a 45-day notice. Definite contracts between 12 and 36 months, those require 30 days. And if you're on a short-term definite contract of under 12 months, you only need to give 3 days of notice. But as with everything, there are powerful exceptions to the standard rules. Article 5 empowers you with a critical right. It clearly states that employees have the right to refuse work if there is a clear and direct threat to life or health. So if your workplace becomes legitimately dangerous, you absolutely do not have to wait out a 45-day notice period. Your physical safety legally supersedes the standard countdown. Section 5. Allowances upon leaving. The details for these financial buffers are locked inside Articles 46 and 47, but there's a primary gatekeeper rule you need to know about right away. To access these benefits, you generally must have worked regularly for the employer for at least 12 full months. If you hit that 1-year mark, you unlock these financial protections. Let's clearly distinguish between the two allowances detailed in those articles, because they dictate how your final payout is calculated. Severance allowance grants you a half-month salary for every single year you worked. However, a job loss allowance, which typically applies in cases of employer structural changes or economic reasons, is much more robust. It grants 1 full month's salary per year worked, and importantly, it mandates a minimum payout of at least 2 months' salary no matter what. So, we've tracked the entire employee life cycle through the lens of the 2019 Vietnamese Labor Code, breaking down these complex legal texts into actionable knowledge. I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. Does your current labor contract actually comply with what you just learned? I highly encourage you to pull out your employment documents tonight. Check your probation length, verify your notice period, and confirm your rights. Knowledge is power, but only when you actually apply it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.